Imelda Marcos has a $829 billion idea to save the world. I have decided to publish this article by Norman Pearlstein from October 2013 because it demonstrates quite clearly that Imelda hasn't changed. She's still peddling the weird ideas she was pushing back in the early 70s, a combination of wacky new age philosophy mixed with a small dose of fact, just for the skeptics, and rounded off by some personal conspiracy theory. Will anyone give her the $829 billion a year for the next 4 years to dig 6.5 miles down into the Philippine Trench to extract deuterium? I very much doubt it unless they are as fanciful as Imelda and willing to give away or invest a fortune and lose it all. The reason is the deuterium can just easily be gathered, at a fraction of the cost, from the surface of the ocean. But that doesn't stop Imelda. Imelda Marcos wants to save the world, albeit stylishly. Wearing a simple, discreet slide sandal, the 84-year-old former First Lady of the Philippines greets a visitor to her spacious, memento-laden Manila apartment with a surprise. Before reminiscing about politics, fashion, or her years in and out of power, she wants to talk seriously about energy. It seems that uncommon amounts of deuterium, an isotope also known as heavy hydrogen, reside in the water at the bottom of the Philippine Trench. To get it, all you have to do is cruise out 170 miles east of the Philippines and bring water up from the ocean floor, about 6.5 miles below the surface. Marcos, the widow of former Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos, who died in disgrace and in exile in Honolulu in 1989, says she spends millions of dollars a year to maintain her exclusive right to extract water from the trench in the hope that having an abundance of deuterium can speed the development of advanced nuclear fusion reactors. She's seeking billions of dollars from foreign investors to fulfill her vision. Called Madam by many of her admirers in the Philippines, Marcos remains a relentless, beguiling, and slightly wacky self-promoter. She says Edward Teller, the controversial physicist known as the father of the hydrogen bomb, persuaded her to develop her country's deuterium in a 1971 visit to the Malacanang Palace, the Philippine president's residence. Teller, she adds, was a major supporter of her efforts until he died in 2003. While fusion holds immense promise, its progress has been stymied for decades by technological challenges, and is likely to remain slow. Dennis White, a professor of nuclear science and engineering at the MIT Plasma Science and Fusion Center, pours cold water on Madam's assertions when he says deuterium is readily available in seawater, even at the surface, adding that a viable demonstration fusion reactor is expected to be online in 2040 or later, with commercialization beyond that time. Nevertheless, Marcos says she carries on because deuterium can save the world. Her current efforts are encapsulated in 2 booklets. 1, a feasibility study, acknowledges costs but claims that deuterium pumped from the Philippine Trench could be processed into a high-potent but environmentally friendly fuel that would eventually replace conventional or fossil fuel gas. According to her study, the proposed venture would earn $829 billion a year in its first 4 years after operations begin. As for the billions she'd personally make from the project, Marcos quotes her late husband, who used to say, "What is good for all is good for me." Marcos says she's in discussions with Japanese businessmen who want to team up with the Philippine government to extract deuterium from the trench. She thinks big oil companies would be logical investors, and she'd like to attract additional funding from US, Chinese, and Russian investors. I have been nagging my American friends to invest, she says. But the project seems so unbelievable, they think I am crazy. While she pushes deuterium with a zealot's ferocity, Marcos does have other passions. The Marcos brand has regained much of the popularity it lost when the family was forced from power in the 1980s, and since 2010 she has served as a member of the House of Representatives. Her son Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., a graduate of the University of Oxford and the Wharton School, has a seat in the Philippine Senate. Speculation abounds that he'll run for president in 2016, when Benigno Aquino III's term ends. As the conversation continues over a lengthy steak and vegetable dinner at a hotel's Italian restaurant, Marcos journeys back into her personal history. After her mother died when she was 8, Imelda and her family, she was the 6th of 11 children, lived on a coconut plantation on the island of Leyte. She moved to Manila in 1950, where she worked as a singer in music stores while participating in beauty contests. 4 years later, she met Ferdinand, a 37-year-old senator, and much decorated former soldier. Marcos proposed to me 20 minutes after we met, she says, and 11 days later we were married. Imelda Marcos' passion could cost $829 billion idea. Imelda Marcos, the former First Lady of the Philippines, had expressed her passion for saving the world as before she was reminiscing about politics, fashion, or her years in and of power. Seriously, she wants to talk about energy, As the former First Lady of the Philippines greets visitors in her Manila apartment years back, Imelda Marcos discusses uncommon amounts of deuterium, an isotope also known as heavy hydrogen that resides in the water at the bottom of the Philippine Trench. Unable to get it, you have to cruise out 170 miles east of the Philippines and bring water up from the ocean floor, of about 6.5 miles below the surface. Imelda Marcos says she spends millions of dollars a year just to maintain her exclusive right to extract water from the trench, hoping that having an abundance of deuterium can speed the development of advanced nuclear fusion reactors. She even seeking billions of dollars from foreign investors to achieve her vision. She then remembered Edward Teller, the controversial physicist is known as the father of hydrogen bomb, who persuaded her to develop her country's deuterium when Teller visited 1971 the Malacanang Palace. She also added that Teller was a major supporter of her efforts until he died in 2003. Because of technological challenges, its progress is likely to remain slow for decades. A professor of nuclear science and engineering at the MIT Plasma Science and Fusion Center, Dennis White, discourages Marcos's assertion, saying, "Deuterium is readily available in seawater, even at the surface." White said, "A viable demonstration fusion reactor is expected to be online in 2040 or later, with commercialization beyond that time," White added. In spite of that, Marcos says she carries on believing that deuterium can save the world. Her current efforts were enclosed in 2 booklets. One is a feasibility study that claims deuterium pumped from the Philippine Trench could be processed into high-potent but environmentally friendly fuel that could possibly replace conventional or fossil fuel gas. The study, according to Marcos, the proposed venture would earn $829 billion a year in its 4 years after operations begin. She personally quotes her late husband, who used to say, "What is good for all is good for me," as for the billions she'd make from the project. Marcos says that she's in talks with Japanese businessmen who want to team up with the Philippine government in extracting deuterium from the trench. She even said that big oil companies would be logical investors and like to attract additional funding from the US, Chinese and Russian investors. "I have been nagging my American friends to invest," she said. "But the project seems so unbelievable, they think I am crazy." Imelda Marcos is infamous for her extravagance. This included owning more than 1,000 pairs of shoes, that some of which are now displayed in a museum in Marikina. She served as the First Lady after her husband Ferdinand Marcos was elected on November 9, 1965, as the 10th President of the Philippines. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources, DENR, is eyeing to spend an initial $100 million for an ambitious offshore mineral exploration project in the Philippine Rise and the Celebes Sea in the next 3 years. Initially, a $30 million budget has already been approved in principle, setting the proposed project in motion for next year's offshore exploration activities. The proposal to explore the Philippine Rise was made 3 years ago, but it was only now that a proposed budget has finally been approved. Environment Undersecretary for Mining Mario Luis J. Jacinto, also concurrent director of the Mines and Geosciences Board, MGB, said the proposed budget for 2019 is $33 million, and for 2020, $37 million. Given the task at hand, the government will be spending at least $500 million in the next 3 years, including the acquisition of equipment for the deepwater mineral exploration and repair of the DENR's research vessel, although only the requested budget of $30 million for 2018 has been approved by Environment Secretary Roy A. Simatu so far. The $30 million budget for next year's exploration will be equally divided, with exploration activities for Philippine Rise and the Celebes Sea each getting a $15 million allocation. Environmental groups, this early, are stiffly opposing the plan and chided the DENR MGB for coming up with the proposal. Gloria Estenzo Ramos, Vice President of Oceana Philippines, an ocean conservation advocacy group, described the proposal as alarming. "I hope the fund goes to biodiversity protection instead to help make our oceans healthy to boost food security. Coming from the DENR, which is also tasked by our laws to mainstream environmental protection, that is really alarming," Ramos said. "You know, I'm not sure if they even consulted the Biodiversity Management Bureau, BMB. We know that the Philippines is part of the Coral Triangle, so we are host to the most diverse marine and coral ecosystem. If you do exploration, the most likely victims are the marine ecosystem," she said.